From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
Trades are wild right now in the NFL, and it's really interesting to see because we haven't even gotten into the trade deadline part of the season. Normally that's a little closer and really at the middle part of the regular season, but we're just now starting to get into week 7. And we got some big blockbuster trades that have happened over the last couple of days. It's pretty interesting to see. Welcome into yet another edition of Cleats and Sneaks, the podcast talking about everything that's been going on with the NFL and the NBA. And there's no shortage because we got 2 big-time trades over the last couple of days this week, ending week 6, heading into week 7. And let me tell you, they're actually pretty interesting to see, both with the wide receivers. And then there was another one with a running back, but we'll get to that soon enough. I do want to start off with the big one. It is Davante Adams. He is actually heading to New York, and he pretty much is already there because he's getting traded from the Las Vegas Raiders to the New York Jets. Going to revisit and kind of reestablish himself with his former quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, kind of rekindle that relationship that used to be over in Green Bay. But when it comes to the actual picks and the nitty-gritty of it all, it looks like the Jets are actually going to be paying pretty much all of the rest of Davante's contract, which was kind of a talking point between it being the Jets or the Saints and who's actually going to trade for him. And that kind of depending on if the Jets or the Raiders would actually have to take a bit of the contract of Davante, there would have to be more draft capital involved. And it looks like it was pretty interesting to see how this all goes down because the Jets are actually sending a conditional third, which could become a second depending on the performance of Adams with the green and white. But my overall thoughts on this trade is, okay, that it's good to see that Adams is actually able to get out of Vegas because you could just kind of tell ever since he got there and the Raiders moved on from Carr and didn't re-sign him, he was pretty pissed. He was really upset that Derek Carr was not able to be there because remember, that was actually his quarterback back at Fresno State. And that was the big intention is he wanted to go play with his former quarterback. They kind of took that away from him. He had to play with Jimmy G. He was pissed with that. They were like, don't you worry. We got you a new quarterback, bud. It's going to be Gardner Minshew. And don't get me wrong. I actually really like Gardner Minshew as a quarterback. I like him as an overall guy. He's always really funny to see on social media. But when it comes to technical quarterback play and guys that you can rely on for more than just a couple of weeks in spot starts, no, I don't think Gardner Minshew is one of those guys that you can answer to. Because if, in fact, you actually look at it, Aiden O'Connell is now the starter for the Raiders as well. So good on you, Vegas. But no, good for him to get out of there. He goes, plays with his old quarterback again with Aaron Rodgers, and it's kind of fair in a sense because you look at the offense and it hasn't been super productive, but it's really interesting to see how this is going to go down because you bring Davante in, but you also have one of his other favorite targets, Aaron Rodgers that is, in Allen Lazard, plus you have the young Ohio State wide receiver Garrett Wilson who's kind of trying to make a name for himself and really try to take that next step forward. So it's really interesting to see how is Rodgers and this new offense going to be able to balance all that because remember, you now have play calling duties with another guy not named Nathaniel Hackett, plus you moved on from your head coach Robert Saleh, so your defensive coordinator is now your head coach. So you're elevating and switching positions and different duties for different guys on the coaching staff, plus you're bringing in another guy that you're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to be able to balance all of these touches because not everyone's going to be able to eat every week. But the thing is, there's already so much of rapport between Rodgers and Adams. Then you also have such a big rapport once Adams left with Allen Lazard, and he went to the Jets because Aaron Rodgers specifically wanted that to happen. Plus, you're trying to get the young buck his touches because it's like, well, you spend a first-round pick on him. You're not going to not throw him the football. Plus, you're still trying to get other guys involved. You like the tight end, Tyler Conklin, those guys, that's going to be irrelevant. But still trying to get your touches with your star running back in Breece Hall. Plus, you got the 20-year-old running back in Braylon Allen. It's really interesting to see, but it doesn't this trade doesn't fix all of Green Bay's issues. Because you look at what's going on, and then also right after the trade happened and it was official, we got reports that the Jets are trying to ship and trade Michael Williams away, which is understandable because I had next to no hope that he was still going to be productive as a wide receiver. You could tell that Los Angeles, the Chargers, were more than willing to move on from him. And just watching him over the last couple of years, he's looked slower and slower, and the injuries were starting to build up on him. And then even you look at Monday Night Football against the Bills, it's just not looking good for him. I don't see how much longer his career could go. I just don't think it lasts as much longer. But not only that, but I really think the offensive line is something that they need to figure out because they got a bunch of good individual offensive linemen. It's not like they didn't do their due diligence in the offseason to try and improve it, to make sure that Aaron Rodgers doesn't get injured on the football field again, and your season just goes down in the toilet. But what we've seen so far is there's a lot of dysfunction, not only with the Jets organization, but play on the field, the play calls itself. So even though it's nice that you get the new shiny piece and the veteran wide receiver that Aaron Rodgers wanted or kind of really wanted to rekindle with and come back to, that's nice. But I'm just not confident at all that this is going to turn around a Jets season that has now started 2-4. The other big trade that had happened just the other day is Amari Cooper. And as opposed to what I talked about with the Jets, where I give it like a C+, like I'm just not super impressed with it, I actually give this next trade an A if I'm having to grade it like I'm a teacher. Amari Cooper going from the Cleveland Browns to the Buffalo Bills. And here's the thing. I talked about how the Jets gave up a conditional third and it could be a second. I look at what had happened. You're basically giving up the same if you're the Bills. They're actually giving up a third and a sixth, and they're actually getting Amari Cooper in a seventh, or they're giving up a seventh and getting a sixth back. It's late round picks, but those aren't really important. The main thing is Amari Cooper for a third. I think this is amazing for the Buffalo Bills because you look at them so far, they're actually 4-2. And I think we looked at everything that had happened over the offseason with the Bills, and we're thinking they're probably going to take a step back. I mean, look at how many guys they got rid of. They're relying on a lot of the young guys. They got Damar Hamlin now starting at safety, and even though he had the near-death experience on the field, it didn't look like he was showing that much promise. They're moving on from their center. They're moving on from their star wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, and they're relying on a whole bunch of young guys to take that next step forward. How is Josh Allen going to be able to carry this team back to the playoffs in a quote-unquote loaded AFC? Well, it looks like they're doing just fine. The defense looks pretty solid, even with guys like Matt Milano going down for the year before the season even started. You're relying on young safeties and guys that aren't like quote-unquote big-time names like they had before. And then even Von Miller's suspended right now, but not much has changed with them defensively. They still look pretty solid. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball. Josh Allen, he actually is turning the ball over a lot less. He used to be a turnover machine. He actually looks a lot more efficient now. Plus, the run game still looks pretty solid. They got James Cook. Even when James Cook was out on Monday night, their rookie running back, Ray Davis, he looked pretty solid. Plus, you have a lot of young pieces, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman. You have the veteran Curtis Samuel, all at wide receiver. That's kind of been a wide receiver by committee in a sense. And then you still have your two tight end sets with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. So you still have a lot of weapons. It's just the only thing is there was no one main guy on the outside, whether at tight end or wide receiver, that you could consistently go to. And here in the local area, I mean, we're rooting for Keon Coleman to be able to take that next step forward and really build that rapport with Josh Allen and kind of be his next go-to guy. But I think this is a perfect trade, and I say perfect relatively because I think this is about as good of a trade as you can make if you're the Buffalo Bills. Because here's the thing. One of the big things about Stephon Diggs was, yes, he's one of the best in the NFL, but there was always chatter on and off the field. There was always things going on social media, off the field, things where you're like, this guy just is a distraction. And you always kind of go back to those old Viking days, and you could even go back to that old YouTube video where the guys were like, I would never let Stephon Diggs date my sister, and you just hear about everything, all the rumors going on with Diggs and how he kind of acts and kind of presents himself in real life and on the field. You just don't love it all the time, and you could just kind of tell that the relationship between him and the Bills organization were splitting apart by the seams last season. So them moving on was a good thing, but they didn't have a go-to guy to go to who was someone that Josh Allen could immediately trust. We were hoping it was Keon Coleman, but he hasn't necessarily shown that or proven to Josh Allen, like, hey, I got your back all the time. So the fact that they're actually getting a veteran wide receiver who, in my eyes, is still one of the best in the NFL, maybe not a top 5, top 10 guy, but I still think top 15 is within the realm of possibility. So the fact that you're getting one of those guys that still has it, and you even look at what had happened with Amari Cooper this year, and he hasn't been productive. But to me, I put that more on the inability of Deshaun Watson to have chemistry with Amari, because ever since the Browns made that trade, it just hasn't worked out. We saw once Deshaun got injured and he was out for the year, and they turned to Joe Flacco to be like, hey, we're going to have to rely on you, bud. I don't know if you can still sling it, but let's see. Turns out Joe Flacco can still sling it, and he, what felt like, revived Amari Cooper's career. Like, it was insane. Just go back to the numbers and look at the game logs of Joe Flacco and Amari Cooper together, the back half of the season for the Browns and even in the playoffs. Like, those two guys were making magic together. It was insane to watch. So I think that Amari still has plenty of left in the tank. He's still got a few really good more years left in him. So the fact that he's going from Deshaun Watson to Josh Allen, I think is a huge upgrade for Buffalo. You're getting a stable guy that still has a lot left in the tank, plus has never really been a diva in a sense. Like, how often do you hear about Amari Cooper off the field, not only during the season, but in the offseason as well, as like a quote-unquote distraction? I think this is a 10 out of 10 knockout in the park, because you're getting a guy that's good on the field and off the field, can still be productive, is basically a security blanket for you, and is a veteran that you're kind of looking for in that room, because outside of Curtis Samuel, who are you looking towards to be like, hey, you're going to be the voice of that room? Now it can be Amari Cooper, plus you're not giving up a whole lot. A third-round pick, like, you're already 4-2. You're ahead of the game. You're doing a lot better than a lot of people anticipated you were going to be able to do if you're the Buffalo Bills. So, Bills Mafia, go break some more tables, because this is awesome. I love this trade for y'all. Now, the other big, or really isn't that big, but a small trade, Houston Texans are moving on from Cam Akers. He's actually going back to the Vikings. This is like the second time in about 11, 12, 13 months that Cam Akers is going back to the Vikings, which is really interesting, because he was with Minnesota, moves on, goes to Houston, and is now back with Minnesota. So interesting to see. It was a really low-key trade, but it's something to keep in mind, especially since the health of Aaron Jones isn't quite there right now. Aaron Jones still looks like a good running back. It's just he got injured, so I'm not quite sure where that is, but the wear and tear may start maybe getting to Jones a little bit. So having a young security blanket, even though Akers has a decently big injury history for such a young career, getting another guy in that backfield as another guy just in case, it's a good thing to do. So that was a good move by the Vikings as well. Big slate of games this week for Week 7 as well, but I do want to specifically get into Thursday Night Football because, this game tonight is going to be awful. Pat Surtain's not going to play for the Broncos, but to me it really doesn't matter, because there's so many bigger injuries on the Saints side. Eric McCoy's still on IR. You're actually going to be without right guard Cesar Ruiz. Not quite sure yet, but I think Lucas Patrick at left guard is going to be good to go. But Derek Carr is going to be out, so you're going to be starting the rookie quarterback in Spencer Rattler once again, who looks okay, I guess, based on your expectations for the rookie in his debut. But outside of that, you now are going to be without Chris Olave because he's out with a concussion. I don't know how you can go from a Sunday to a Thursday and be like, oh yeah, concussion, you're good to go. But then also today, Rashid Shaheed's actually headed out to Cali to go get surgery on his meniscus, and depending on what happens, what they find out post-surgery, either Shaheed's going to be out for the next few weeks and go on IR, or he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. So at that point, you got that. Pete Warner's going to be out. You got some other guys here and there that haven't looked good because Cam looks washed, but he's still technically healthy. But still, some big key pieces that aren't going to be there for the Saints. Taysom Hill is also doubtful. That's another big piece for the Saints and that offensive side of the football. So I don't know how this offense is going to be able to score points against a really good Broncos defense. To me, it doesn't matter if Pat Surtain is playing or not because he also has a concussion, so he's out as well. But I actually wrote down on the board as a joke who the wide receivers are going to be available for the Saints, looking at the active roster and looking at the practice squad, because there's a couple of guys you're probably going to have to elevate. And let me read them off to you real quick. How about rookie Bub Means? Him and Spencer Rattler actually looked like they had a little bit of a connection. A couple of rookies out there getting each of their first touchdowns came on Sunday against the Bucs. So maybe that could come back tonight. Who knows? No, then I'm looking at Equanimeous St. Brown, probably going to get elevated off the practice squad. You're also looking at Mason Tipton, and you're looking at Cedric Wilson. Those are the main four that I think are going to be out there. Then it comes down to who do you think is going to be the fifth wide receiver and the second guy that they elevate, if they elevate anybody else. But the other options are, how about Kevin Austin Jr., Jermaine Jackson, and recently signed to the practice squad, 6-year vet Dante Pettis. That's a core of receivers that you love to hear, right? It's a bunch of studs. This is gonna be so bad. Yeah, I'll be honest. With the way the Saints have been playing, the fact that they're playing their third game in 11 days, they looked gas on Sunday against the Bucs. I just don't know how the Saints are going to be able to win on Thursday night tonight against a Denver Broncos team that's going to be led by rookie Bo Nix, who hasn't lit the world on fire, but the biggest storyline is the fact that Sean Payton is returning to the Caesar Superdome, the place where he called plays and coached these Saints teams for a decade and a half. So that's really the big storyline, and I feel like with the pettiness of him, he's going to get guys like Little Jordan Humphrey, Michael Burton, maybe even A.T. Perry, who had just the other week got signed to the practice squad for the Broncos, maybe even a sec by Malcolm Roach. Like, I feel like all these former Saints are going to have big days. Will Lutt's going to make like 3 or 4 field goals, and you're like, all right, there it is. Cool. But right now, the New Orleans Saints 2-4, don't love their chances. Kind of feels like it's a desperation type of move if you get down to 2-5 and lose 5 straight games after a phenomenal start 2-0. At this point, it feels like the season's kind of going down the drain really quickly, and time's kind of running out because you're looking at other teams like the Falcons and the Bucs. They're looking pretty good right now in the NFC South, so you got to try and keep yourself afloat. Not sure that you're going to be able to do it, though. If you're asking me for a prediction or a score prediction, I'll say 31-16 Broncos. I'll try to keep it close. Appreciate you listening in and tuning in to another edition of Cleats and Seeks. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, ESPN Southwest Louisiana, and also turn on the notification bell. That way you get notified anytime we upload any one of our podcasts, not just this one. How about the 4 Tire Change podcast, talking NASCAR and racing with Dawson Islow? We also have the Miguez Mindset with Matt Miguez, and he also does a second one. How about Over Par? How about a little golf talk? Then we also have the local content, LSU Tigers, New Orleans Saints, Louisiana Raging Cajuns, McNeese Cowboys, New Orleans Pelicans. NBA season's about to come around the corner. How about that? And so much more. But I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll get back to you next week.